Morning sunlight spilled across the polished hardwood floors of the Harper residence, casting warm patterns through tall windows that overlooked a quiet suburban street. To anyone passing by, the house represented success, stability, and the kind of peaceful life many families dreamed of building. Neighbors often admired its carefully maintained garden, its welcoming front porch, and the laughter that occasionally drifted through open windows during summer evenings. Nothing about the home suggested that invisible cracks had already begun spreading beneath its perfect exterior. Daniel Harper had spent nearly 20 years designing homes that reflected comfort and security. As one of the city's most respected architects, he understood how even the strongest structures depended upon solid foundations. Every blueprint he created balanced beauty with precision, ensuring each wall carried its proper weight. Ironically, he believed marriages followed the same principle. Trust, honesty, and loyalty formed the pillars that supported every lasting relationship. Without them, collapse was only a matter of time. At 42, Daniel carried himself with quiet confidence rather than arrogance. His colleagues admired his patience, clients appreciated his integrity, and friends often sought his advice during difficult moments. He preferred solving problems calmly instead of raising his voice, believing that understanding people required listening far more than speaking. Those closest to him described him as dependable, the kind of man who would answer a phone call at 3 in the morning without asking unnecessary questions. Every weekday began almost identically. Daniel woke before sunrise, brewed fresh coffee, and reviewed sketches spread across the dining table before leaving for his office. The routine grounded him, offering comfort in its predictability. He enjoyed watching the neighborhood slowly awaken while sipping coffee beside the kitchen window, where birds gathered around a small feeder Sophia had hung years earlier. Sophia Harper usually joined him several minutes later, greeting him with a gentle smile before preparing breakfast. She possessed a quiet elegance that drew attention without demanding it. Friends admired her kindness, while strangers remembered her calm voice long after brief conversations. She volunteered at local charity events, remembered birthdays everyone else forgot, and somehow made every guest feel genuinely welcome inside their home. Their marriage had once seemed effortless. They had met during a community fundraising event nearly 15 years earlier. Daniel remembered the exact moment she laughed at one of his terrible jokes about modern architecture. That laugh had convinced him to ask for her number. Their courtship had been filled with road trips, shared dreams, and countless promises about building a future together. Over time, they became the couple everyone quietly envied. Yet something had changed. Not dramatically, not suddenly. Only enough that Daniel occasionally caught himself wondering whether he was imagining it. Sophia still smiled. She still kissed him goodbye before work. She still asked how his meetings had gone. But the warmth behind those gestures seemed thinner than before, almost rehearsed. Conversations that once flowed naturally now ended in comfortable silence that somehow felt increasingly uncomfortable. Daniel dismissed the feeling every time it surfaced. Marriage changed, he reminded himself. People became busy. Responsibilities multiplied. Emotional seasons shifted just as naturally as the weather. One Friday afternoon, Daniel left work earlier than expected after completing a major presentation. Wanting to surprise Sophia, he stopped at her favorite bakery before driving home with a small box of chocolate pastries balanced carefully on the passenger seat. When he entered the house, he found Sophia sitting alone in the living room. She appeared startled. "So you're home already?" she asked. "The meeting ended early," Daniel replied with an easy smile. "Thought I'd surprise you." Her expression softened. "That's sweet." He placed the pastries on the coffee table. "I figured we could have coffee together." "Of course." Although she smiled again, Daniel noticed she quickly locked her phone before placing it face down beside a decorative cushion. The detail lasted only a second. He ignored it. People valued privacy. There was nothing unusual about that. As they drank coffee together, Sophia seemed distracted. Several times she glanced toward the kitchen, almost as if expecting another sound. When Daniel spoke about a new architectural project downtown, she nodded politely but occasionally asked him to repeat himself. "You seem tired," he observed gently. "I didn't sleep well." Everything okay? She hesitated. Just stress. Daniel reached across the table and squeezed her hand. We'll get through whatever it is. She squeezed back. I know. The conversation ended there. That evening Daniel received a call from his oldest friend, Ethan Brooks. The two had known each other since childhood, surviving schoolyard fights, university struggles, broken relationships, and countless personal setbacks together. Ethan was one of the few people Daniel trusted without hesitation. Over decades, their friendship had become more like family than companionship. Still alive over there? Ethan joked. Barely, Daniel laughed. Deadlines are trying. You always say that. And somehow I survive. They agreed to meet for lunch the following week. Daniel mentioned Sophia. She seems exhausted lately. Probably just needs a vacation, Ethan replied. You're probably right. The call ended with easy laughter that reflected years of unquestioned loyalty. Daniel never imagined either relationship could become the source of unimaginable heartbreak. Later that night, the house settled into silence. Rain tapped softly against the bedroom windows while distant thunder rolled across the dark sky. Daniel fell asleep quickly after another exhausting week at work, breathing steadily beside his wife. Sometime after midnight, a faint vibration disturbed the quiet. Sophia's phone. She opened her eyes instantly, carefully lifting the device from the bedside table. She glanced toward Daniel to ensure he remained asleep. The screen illuminated her anxious expression for only a brief moment before she quietly slipped out of bed. Standing alone in the hallway, she answered in a whisper. Her face drained of color as she listened. No, not now, she murmured. She ended the call almost immediately. When she returned to the bedroom, Daniel stirred slightly. Everything all right? He asked drowsily. Sophia forced a quick smile as she slid the phone beneath her pillow. Wrong number, she answered softly. Daniel accepted the explanation without another thought and drifted back to sleep. Beside him, however, Sophia remained awake, staring into the darkness, as the weight of a secret she could no longer outrun settled heavily over the silent room. Before sunrise, she quietly reached for the hidden phone once again, knowing that whatever awaited her on the other end of those calls was only beginning, and that the next decision she made would draw someone far closer than either of them could possibly imagine. I've expanded the chapter below, keeping the transition from chapter 1 seamless and ending with a lead-in to the next chapter. The following morning, Sophia carried herself as though nothing unusual had happened. She prepared breakfast, smiled politely across the table, and watched Daniel leave for work with the same gentle wave she had offered countless times before. Only after his car disappeared around the corner did the smile slowly fade from her face. The silence inside the house suddenly felt heavier than the night before, as if every room held a question she refused to answer. She picked up her phone and stared at a message that had arrived only minutes earlier. Can we meet today? It was from Ethan Brooks. Daniel's oldest friend had become a familiar presence in their lives over the years. He attended birthdays, holidays, and neighborhood barbecues, often joking that he knew Daniel almost better than Daniel knew himself. His easygoing personality made people comfortable, and Sophia had always considered him family. That familiarity had quietly become something far more dangerous. It had started innocently several months earlier while Daniel was consumed by an ambitious commercial project that demanded endless late nights. Ethan had stopped by one afternoon to return borrowed tools, and the conversation unexpectedly lasted hours. They spoke about forgotten dreams, disappointments, and the quiet loneliness that sometimes existed inside otherwise happy lives. Those conversations became coffee meetings. Coffee became long drives. Long drives became carefully hidden afternoons neither of them intended to explain. Neither believed they were searching for an affair. They simply stopped resisting the comfort they found in each other's company. By early afternoon, Sophia met Ethan at a quiet lakeside cafe outside town where familiar faces were unlikely to appear. Rain clouds drifted lazily overhead while soft music played through nearly empty rooms. You look exhausted, Ethan said as she sat down. I haven't been sleeping. Daniel noticing? She shook her head. He's worried, but he thinks it's just stress. Ethan lowered his eyes. We should stop. Sophia looked at him for several silent seconds. Do you really want to? He hesitated before answering. No. Neither of them smiled. The admission only deepened the guilt already hanging between them. Over the following weeks, their secret relationship intensified despite repeated promises to end it. Every stolen conversation convinced them the next would be the last. Every goodbye somehow led to another meeting. They lived between excitement and shame, forever glancing over their shoulders while convincing themselves nobody suspected anything. Daniel remained completely unaware. He trusted them both without reservation. That trust quietly protected their deception. One Thursday morning, however, Sophia arrived alone at a private medical clinic on the opposite side of the city. Her hands trembled while completing paperwork. The doctor's expression remained unusually serious as he entered the examination room carrying a folder. I'm afraid your confirmatory results have returned. Sophia felt her heartbeat quicken. You tested positive. The words echoed inside the room long after the doctor stopped speaking. He carefully explained treatment options, specialist referrals, modern medication, and the importance of notifying anyone who might be affected. His voice remained calm and compassionate, but Sophia barely heard individual sentences. Fear overwhelmed everything else. Questions raced through her mind faster than she could answer them. How? When? Who? What would Daniel think? What would Ethan say? She left the clinic clutching a folder she could not bring herself to open. Instead of driving home immediately, she parked beside an empty playground and cried until sunset. The following days became a blur of denial. She hid the paperwork beneath old winter clothes inside a closet. She ignored emails from the clinic. She convinced herself another test might somehow change reality. Most dangerously, she told no one. Not Daniel. Not Ethan. Not even herself. Whenever guilt surfaced, she buried it beneath forced smiles and carefully rehearsed conversations. Every lie became slightly easier than the last. Ethan noticed her growing anxiety but misunderstood its cause. If this is about us, he said during another secret meeting, we'll figure something out. Sophia looked away. I hope so. She desperately wanted to confess everything. The words reached her throat countless times before fear pushed them back into silence. As evening settled over the neighborhood, she returned home before Daniel, carefully resuming the role of devoted wife. Hours later, while Ethan slept peacefully believing their greatest danger was discovery, Sophia's phone vibrated once again across the bedside table. The hospital's number illuminated the screen. She stared at it until the ringing stopped. Without answering, she turned the phone face down, closed her eyes, and allowed the silence to bury the truth one more night, unaware that every unanswered call was carrying both of them toward a devastating reckoning. The unanswered hospital calls eventually stopped, but the silence they left behind proved far more dangerous. Sophia convinced herself that avoiding reality somehow delayed its consequences. She continued moving through each day behind carefully practiced smiles, while Ethan remained unaware that every passing week carried him closer to a truth neither of them could escape. At first, the symptoms seemed insignificant. Ethan woke one morning feeling unusually tired. He blamed the exhaustion on long hours at work and a demanding construction project that required constant site inspections. A mild fever followed 2 days later, along with headaches and aching muscles. He laughed it off when coworkers suggested he might have caught a seasonal virus. You look terrible, one colleague joked. I've survived worse, Ethan replied with a tired grin. He swallowed painkillers, drank extra coffee, and forced himself through another week. Instead of improving, his condition slowly worsened. The fever returned each evening. His throat became painfully sore. Night sweats soaked his bedsheets, leaving him exhausted before every sunrise. When swollen lymph nodes appeared around his neck, even Ethan could no longer dismiss the symptoms as an ordinary illness. His family physician examined him carefully before recommending additional laboratory testing. It's probably nothing serious, the doctor reassured him. But I'd rather be thorough. Ethan nodded, relieved by the calm explanation. He never imagined those tests would divide his life into before and after. 3 anxious days later, he returned to the clinic. The consultation room felt unusually quiet. The physician entered carrying a sealed folder, his expression professional yet noticeably restrained. "Mr. Brooks," he began gently, "your results require us to have a difficult conversation." Ethan's heartbeat accelerated. "What's wrong?" The doctor paused before answering. "Your HIV screening was reactive, and the confirmatory testing has verified the diagnosis." The words struck with overwhelming force. For several long seconds, Ethan simply stared across the desk. "I'm positive? I'm afraid so." The room blurred around him. His breathing became shallow as disbelief collided with fear. "There has to be some mistake. We repeated the testing to ensure accuracy." "No." Ethan shook his head repeatedly. "I don't understand." The physician explained modern treatment options, antiviral medication, specialist referrals, and the importance of notifying anyone who might have been exposed. He emphasized that people living with HIV could now lead long, healthy lives with proper medical care. Ethan heard almost none of it. Only one sentence echoed inside his mind. "You have HIV." Leaving the clinic, he wandered aimlessly through nearby streets without remembering where he had parked his car. Every memory from recent months replayed relentlessly inside his head. Every decision, every relationship, every intimate moment. He had not been involved with multiple partners. Before Sophia, he had ended a brief relationship nearly a year earlier, and both had undergone routine health screenings afterward without concern. One possibility remained: Sophia. The realization chilled him. He immediately searched through old messages, replayed conversations, and remembered every occasion she had seemed unusually anxious after visiting doctors or taking mysterious phone calls. Details that once appeared meaningless suddenly aligned with terrifying clarity. By evening, Ethan could no longer tolerate uncertainty. He sent Sophia a brief message. "We need to meet. Tonight. No excuses." She arrived 30 minutes later at the same isolated lakeside cafe where their affair had quietly begun. Rain tapped against the windows while only a single employee cleaned tables near the entrance. Sophia recognized Ethan's expression before he spoke. "What happened?" she whispered. He slid a folded medical report across the table. "I tested positive." The color drained from her face. She stared silently at the document. Then she closed her eyes. "You knew," Ethan said quietly. She remained silent. "You knew." A tear rolled down her cheek. "When?" Her voice trembled. "Please. When did you know?" "Before." The single word shattered whatever hope remained. Ethan pushed his chair backward. "You already knew before we were together?" Sophia covered her face with trembling hands. "I couldn't accept it." "You couldn't accept it?" "I was terrified. You let me believe everything was normal. I kept telling myself maybe the results were wrong. You never told me. I was afraid. You had every opportunity." "I know. You looked me in the eyes every single day." "I know. You let me love you." Sophia broke into uncontrollable sobs. "I hated myself every minute." Ethan's anger battled visible heartbreak. "My future has changed forever. I never wanted this. But you allowed it. I couldn't face what had happened. So instead, you made sure I faced it." The accusation lingered heavily between them. Sophia reached toward him. "I'm so sorry." Ethan stepped away before she could touch him. "No." His voice remained calm, but the pain beneath it was unmistakable. "Don't tell me you're sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Intentions don't erase consequences." For several moments, neither of them spoke. Outside, rain intensified, blurring the lights reflected across the dark lake. Everything that had once drawn them together now felt poisoned by betrayal, fear, and irreversible loss. "I loved you," Ethan finally admitted. Sophia lowered her head. "I know. I don't anymore." Those 4 words ended whatever relationship had survived until that night. Without another glance, Ethan walked away into the storm, leaving Sophia alone with the truth she had buried for weeks. As she watched him disappear into the darkness, neither realized that heartbreak was only the beginning, because Ethan's grief would soon harden into something far more dangerous, while another unsuspecting man remained completely unaware that the 2 people he trusted most were carrying secrets capable of destroying all 3 of their lives. The rain continued long after Ethan disappeared into the darkness. leaving Sophia alone beside the quiet lake with tears streaming down her face. His final words echoed relentlessly inside her mind, refusing to fade no matter how desperately she wished they would. By sunrise, she understood that the affair was over, but the consequences of her silence had only begun. Ethan returned to his apartment carrying far more than a devastating diagnosis. He carried betrayal. Every room reminded him of memories that now felt contaminated. Photographs from happier days, messages saved on his phone, and even ordinary places around town became painful evidence of how completely he had trusted Sophia. Sleep abandoned him almost entirely. Whenever exhaustion finally overtook him, nightmares forced him awake before dawn. His anger grew stronger each passing day. Rather than confronting Daniel immediately, Ethan made a different decision. He wanted proof. If Sophia had hidden such an enormous secret once, perhaps she had hidden others as well. He began preserving everything connected to their relationship. Every text message, every photograph, every voicemail, every receipt from restaurants and cafes where they had secretly met. He copied conversations onto encrypted storage drives and printed screenshots, arranging them in carefully labeled folders across his dining table. The collection gradually transformed into a timeline documenting months of deception. The process consumed him. Instead of helping him heal, every piece of evidence deepened his resentment. He replayed old voice messages repeatedly, searching for moments he had overlooked. One recording captured Sophia laughing during a weekend trip they had taken outside the city. Another included her promising that everything would eventually be all right. Now those promises sounded painfully hollow. Meanwhile, life inside the Harper household continued beneath an increasingly fragile illusion. Daniel sensed the growing tension without understanding its cause. Sophia became withdrawn, often staring blankly through kitchen windows or disappearing into another room whenever her phone vibrated. She apologized frequently for being distracted but never offered meaningful explanations. Daniel remained patient. Work has been overwhelming lately, he told himself. He believed stress affected people differently. Still, he quietly noticed small changes. Sophia no longer suggested weekend outings. She rarely finished meals. Several nights she claimed headaches and went to bed unusually early, only for Daniel to hear soft footsteps moving through the hallway long after midnight. He worried about her. One evening, while preparing dinner together, he gently asked, "Do you want to talk about whatever's bothering you?" Sophia forced a tired smile. "I'm just exhausted. You've been saying that for weeks." "I know. Maybe we should take a vacation. Maybe." She kissed his cheek before turning back toward the stove, ending the conversation without addressing his concern. Daniel accepted the silence. He trusted that when she was ready, she would tell him. His concern soon extended beyond his wife. Ethan, usually energetic and outgoing, began avoiding nearly everyone. He declined invitations, ignored phone calls, and repeatedly canceled plans with vague excuses about work obligations. Daniel eventually visited Ethan's apartment without warning. After several moments, the front door slowly opened. Daniel immediately noticed the difference. His friend appeared thinner. Dark circles surrounded tired eyes. Unshaven and visibly drained, Ethan barely resembled the confident man Daniel had known for decades. "You look awful," Daniel said. "I've been busy." "You sick?" "Just dealing with things." Daniel stepped inside. The apartment, normally organized, had become cluttered with scattered papers and unopened mail. "You want to tell me what's going on?" Ethan hesitated. For one brief moment, he nearly confessed everything. Instead, he looked away. "It's family stuff." Daniel nodded sympathetically. "If you need help, you know where to find me." "I know." The words carried genuine appreciation mixed with crushing guilt. Watching Daniel leave hurt almost as much as the diagnosis itself. The man offering unconditional support remained completely unaware that his closest friend had betrayed him in the worst possible way. Across town, Detective Rachel Bennett began an investigation that initially appeared unrelated. Known throughout the department for her attention to detail, Rachel possessed a reputation for recognizing patterns others overlooked. She approached every complaint with equal seriousness, regardless of how insignificant it first appeared. That morning, a local business owner reported receiving several anonymous threats demanding money. Each message originated from different prepaid burner phones. Although the extortion attempt seemed amateurish, Rachel found one detail unusual. Every device had briefly connected to cellular towers surrounding the same suburban neighborhood before disappearing permanently. She requested communication records and instructed the department's digital forensic unit to preserve everything. Most burner phones are disposable, one technician remarked. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. Disposable doesn't mean invisible. The investigation remained minor compared to the department's larger cases, but Rachel quietly filed away every unusual detail. Experience had taught her that unrelated incidents sometimes shared unexpected connections. Elsewhere, Sophia struggled desperately to maintain control over a life unraveling faster than she could repair it. She sent Ethan repeated messages apologizing for everything. Most remained unanswered. Those he did read received only brief responses. "Leave me alone. Stop calling. We're finished." Sophia considered confessing everything to Daniel countless times. Each attempt ended the same way. She imagined his expression, his disappointment, his heartbreak. Then fear silenced her once again. Instead, she chose another mistake. She pleaded with Ethan one final time during a brief phone conversation. "Please," she whispered, "don't destroy Daniel. He deserves the truth. I'll tell him. When? I just need time. You've had months. I'm begging you. So am I." The line went dead. Sophia lowered the phone, realizing she was rapidly losing the ability to control either man. Ethan's determination to preserve evidence grew stronger with every passing day, while Daniel's quiet observations gradually accumulated into questions that could not remain unanswered forever. Neither of them knew that the fragile web of lies holding their lives together was already beginning to tear, and the first thread would soon snap in a way none of them could ever reverse. The fragile balance holding everyone's lives together continued to weaken after Sophia's final unanswered plea. Ethan no longer believed apologies carried any value, while Sophia realized that every passing day increased the likelihood that Daniel would discover everything from someone else. The silence between them had transformed into open hostility, and neither recognized how quickly desperation could reshape an ordinary person into someone unrecognizable. Ethan had once been known for his patience. Friends admired his ability to remain calm during conflict, and Daniel often joked that Ethan could settle arguments before they truly began. That version of Ethan seemed to disappear after his diagnosis. His apartment slowly became an obsession-filled workspace. Medical brochures lay scattered across the dining table beside printed messages, photographs, appointment records, and handwritten timelines documenting every stage of the affair. He spent hours researching HIV treatment, legal responsibilities surrounding disclosure, and civil cases involving deception between intimate partners. Each article deepened his anger. Each story reminded him that his future had changed forever. He stopped answering calls from coworkers. He ignored invitations from friends. Even simple trips to the grocery store became unbearable because ordinary families laughing together reminded him of the life he believed had been stolen from him. Late one evening, Ethan finally made a decision that crossed a dangerous moral boundary. He created a new prepaid phone account using false identification purchased online. Moments later, Sophia's phone vibrated. She stared at the unfamiliar number before answering cautiously. "Hello? You've been avoiding reality long enough." Her breathing immediately quickened. "Ethan, you know exactly who this is. What do you want?" "I want my future back." "I can't give you that." "No." His voice remained cold. "But you can compensate me." Sophia felt her stomach tighten. "What are you talking about?" "You'll transfer $200,000. She nearly dropped the phone. "I don't have that kind of money. You and Daniel own a house worth far more. You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious." "Ethan, please. If you refuse, Daniel learns everything." She closed her eyes. "You wouldn't. I already lost everything." The call ended without another word. Sophia remained frozen in the kitchen for several minutes before quietly deleting the number from her call history. Sleep became almost impossible. Every vibration from her phone triggered another wave of panic. The demands continued. Sometimes Ethan wanted money. Other times he insisted she sign over investment accounts or jewelry Daniel had purchased during happier years. Although the amounts constantly changed, the threat remained identical. Tell Daniel the truth, or I will. Sophia secretly withdrew savings from her personal account and transferred smaller amounts through anonymous payment services, hoping temporary compliance might calm Ethan's growing rage. Instead, every payment convinced him she feared exposure more than financial loss. The demands became increasingly aggressive. Meanwhile, Daniel noticed unusual banking notifications arriving by mail. Sophia intercepted most of them before he could ask questions, claiming they involved insurance paperwork or routine account updates. He accepted the explanations without suspicion. Trust had always been effortless between them. Questioning his wife felt almost insulting. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel unexpectedly suggested inviting Ethan over for dinner. We haven't seen him in weeks. Sophia's face briefly lost its color. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Why not? He seems busy. Daniel smiled. That's exactly why we should check on him. Sophia quickly turned toward the sink before answering. Maybe another weekend. Daniel quietly studied her reflection in the kitchen window. Something felt wrong. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Simply different. He could not explain why both Sophia and Ethan suddenly avoided even hearing each other's names. Later that evening, Daniel visited Ethan's apartment again. This time, Ethan reluctantly answered after several knocks. You disappeared, Daniel said. I've had things to handle. You keep saying that. I know. Daniel looked carefully at his oldest friend. You can tell me if you're in trouble. Ethan almost laughed at the painful irony. I wish it were that simple. Financial problems? No. Family? No. Then what? Ethan opened his mouth. The truth hovered only seconds away. Instead, he forced himself to step backward. I'm just tired. Daniel accepted the answer despite recognizing it was incomplete. Call me if you need anything. I will. As the apartment door closed, Ethan leaned against it and buried his face in trembling hands. He hated lying to Daniel almost as much as he hated Sophia. Across town, Sophia's emotional condition continued deteriorating. She jumped whenever someone rang the front door. Unknown phone numbers immediately triggered panic attacks. She began forgetting appointments, leaving groceries untouched, and staring endlessly at unopened medical prescriptions hidden inside her bedside drawer. The burden of maintaining two enormous secrets became unbearable. One evening she sat alone inside her parked car outside the hospital where she had first received her diagnosis. Her physician had left several additional messages encouraging her to begin treatment immediately. She deleted every voicemail without listening completely. Looking into the rearview mirror, she barely recognized the frightened woman staring back. What have I done? She whispered. For the first time, she seriously considered confessing everything to Daniel. She even drove halfway home rehearsing every sentence. But as she imagined the devastation in his eyes, fear overwhelmed courage once again. She said nothing. Instead, she answered Ethan's newest message. Please stop. I'll find more money. Just don't tell Daniel. His reply arrived almost instantly. Money isn't enough anymore. Sophia felt tears blur the screen. Meanwhile, Daniel slept peacefully upstairs, believing the people he loved most were simply struggling through difficult personal problems. He never imagined that beneath his own roof, guilt, revenge, and deception were quietly colliding, or that the next hidden conversation between Sophia and Ethan would push all three of their lives beyond the point where forgiveness alone could ever repair the damage. Ethan's final message lingered on Sophia's phone long after she locked the screen. She barely slept that night, haunted by the realization that money could no longer contain the disaster she had created. Upstairs, Daniel remained unaware that the foundation of his marriage was already collapsing beneath him. By morning, fate required no confession. The truth would arrive on its own. Daniel planned to spend Saturday reviewing architectural drawings from home. His office had recently upgraded its security system, allowing project files to synchronize automatically with his laptop through cloud storage. After breakfast, Sophia left to buy groceries, grateful for an excuse to escape the suffocating atmosphere inside the house. As Daniel organized digital folders, a notification appeared requesting access to shared security footage from the neighborhood surveillance network. Weeks earlier, several residents had agreed to connect their exterior cameras after a series of vehicle break-ins. Curious whether the system had recorded suspicious activity near his property, Daniel opened the archived files. Most clips showed nothing unusual. Delivery drivers, children riding bicycles, neighbors walking dogs. Then one recording caught his attention. A familiar vehicle slowly pulled into the driveway on a weekday afternoon while Daniel had been working downtown. Ethan climbed out. Daniel smiled at first, assuming his friend had simply stopped by to visit Sophia. The footage continued. Instead of leaving after a few minutes, Ethan remained inside for nearly 4 hours. Daniel frowned. He checked another recording from the following week. The same vehicle appeared again. Another lengthy visit. Then another. His pulse quickened. Trying to dismiss growing suspicion, Daniel searched additional dates. The pattern repeated over and over. Every visit occurred while he had been away. His hands grew noticeably unsteady. There has to be an explanation, he whispered. He immediately reached for Sophia's tablet, intending only to confirm whether Ethan had been helping with repairs or household projects. The device unlocked automatically. A messaging application remained open. Daniel froze. Hundreds of conversations filled the screen. At first, he refused to believe what he was reading. Then individual words pierced through his denial. I miss you. I wish we didn't have to hide. He'll never understand. Further down appeared photographs, weekend outings, private dinners, hotel reservations, voice recordings. Months of secret intimacy unfolded before his eyes with merciless clarity. Daniel's breathing became shallow. His stomach tightened violently. Every memory from recent months transformed instantly. Late-night headaches, unexpected errands, hidden phone calls. Suddenly, every unexplained moment carried horrifying new meaning. He continued scrolling until another conversation stopped him completely. Ethan had written, "You should have told me before we slept together." Sophia replied several minutes later, "I was terrified." Another message followed. The doctors confirmed it before everything happened. Daniel stared motionless at the screen. He did not yet understand what diagnosis they were discussing, but the fear inside those messages was unmistakable. Hours passed before Sophia returned home carrying grocery bags. She smiled automatically upon entering the kitchen. "I picked up your favorite coffee." Daniel remained seated at the dining table. The tablet rested silently before him. His expression immediately erased her smile. "Daniel?" He slowly pushed the device across the table. "You forgot to close your messages." Sophia looked down. The color drained completely from her face. For several endless seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Daniel asked one quiet question. "How long?" She struggled to answer. "Please." "How long?" "Several months." The words shattered whatever hope still remained. Daniel stood. His voice remained calm, though every sentence carried unbearable pain. "My best friend." Sophia covered her mouth with trembling hands. "I'm sorry. You invited him into this house. I know. You looked me in the eyes every single day. I know. You let me believe I was imagining everything." Tears streamed down her face. "I never wanted to hurt you. You already did." He picked up the tablet again. "What were you hiding from him?" Sophia immediately recognized the messages. Her breathing became frantic. "Daniel, what diagnosis?" She remained silent. "What diagnosis?" Finally, her strength collapsed. "I tested positive for HIV." The room became perfectly still. Daniel stared without speaking. "I found out before the affair," she whispered through uncontrollable sobs. "I couldn't accept it." "You knew?" She nodded. "I kept hoping the doctors were wrong." "And Ethan?" "I never told him." Daniel closed his eyes. The betrayal had become almost impossible to comprehend. "You endangered him." "I know. You lied to everyone." "I know. You lied to me." She fell to her knees. "I'm so sorry." Daniel stepped backward. For the first time in their marriage, he could no longer bear standing close to her. He quietly collected his car keys. "Where are you going?" Sophia pleaded. "I don't know. Please don't leave. If I stay right now, I'll never understand what's true anymore." Without another word, Daniel walked out. Instead of driving aimlessly, he rented a small motel room on the outskirts of the city. There, surrounded by unfamiliar walls, he replayed every memory from the past year. His grief slowly transformed into determination. Something still felt incomplete. The messages revealed deception, but they also suggested conversations and events that had never been fully explained. Rather than confronting Ethan immediately, Daniel decided to investigate quietly. He copied every message onto an encrypted drive, photographed the surveillance footage, and began constructing his own timeline of the affair. The architect who once built homes now carefully reconstructed the collapse of his own life, determined to understand every hidden detail before making another decision. While Daniel searched for answers alone, Ethan finalized plans for a private meeting with Sophia, believing their next conversation would finally settle everything between them. Neither man realized that the confrontation approaching in only a few days would end far differently than either expected, drawing them toward a night from which none of their lives would ever recover. Daniel spent the next several days quietly assembling pieces of a story he wished had never existed. Every copied message, every security recording, and every forgotten receipt deepened his understanding of the affair while raising even more questions. One detail troubled him above all others. Ethan's recent messages no longer focused on money alone. Their tone had shifted toward something final, as though he intended to end the deception once and for all. Sophia noticed the change as well. The latest message from Ethan contained only one sentence. "Tonight, lakeside cabin. Come alone or Daniel learns everything." She stared at the screen for nearly an hour. Part of her wanted to ignore him forever. Another part feared that refusing would guarantee public humiliation for everyone involved. Daniel already knew about the affair, but Ethan also possessed medical messages, financial records, and recordings that could expose every painful detail to investigators, neighbors, employers, and the media if he acted recklessly. As sunset approached, she made her decision. She left the house without leaving a note. Daniel, still staying away from home, had quietly installed a location-sharing application on the family emergency account months earlier after Sophia became lost during a road trip. While reviewing account activity that evening, he noticed her phone traveling toward the remote lakeside area. His instincts immediately warned him that something was terribly wrong. He grabbed his keys and started driving. The abandoned cabin stood at the edge of a neglected shoreline surrounded by dense trees and broken fencing. Years earlier it had served as a fishing retreat, but storms and neglect had left the structure weathered and unstable. Wind rattled loose shutters while dark clouds gathered overhead, turning the quiet landscape into something cold and foreboding. Ethan waited inside. A single lantern illuminated the dusty room. Boxes, broken furniture, and cracked windows surrounded him, giving the cabin the appearance of a forgotten place where painful memories naturally belonged. Sophia stepped through the doorway. "You came," Ethan said. "I didn't have much choice." "No." His expression remained hard. "You really didn't." For several seconds, neither moved. Rain began tapping against the roof. Sophia looked exhausted. "I've brought what money I could." She placed a small envelope on the table. Ethan never touched it. "I don't want your money anymore." "Then why am I here?" "I want the truth. You already know it." "I know part of it." She lowered her eyes. "What else is there?" "I want you to say everything out loud." "Ethan, I lost my health. I know. My future. I know. My friendship. I know. My life." Sophia's voice broke. "I know." He stepped closer. "Then tell me why." "I was afraid." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true. You should have told me before we were together." "I couldn't even admit it to myself." "You admitted it every time you chose silence." She covered her face. "I hated myself. Hating yourself never protected me." His words struck with brutal honesty. The tension inside the cabin became unbearable. Sophia reached into her handbag. Ethan immediately stiffened. What are you doing? My medication. Instead, she removed several folded documents. Medical reports, laboratory results, treatment recommendations. I should have shown you these months ago. Ethan snatched the papers. His eyes raced across the dates. The confirmation came before their affair had begun. His hands started trembling. You knew. Tears streamed down Sophia's face. Yes, you looked me in the eyes every day knowing this. I couldn't face reality, so you made me live it. He threw the documents across the room. Sheets of paper scattered like broken promises. His breathing became uneven. I wanted children. Sophia silently cried. I wanted a family. I'm sorry. You destroyed that dream. I never meant to. Intentions mean nothing. He struck the wooden table with both fists, sending the lantern rocking dangerously. The sudden movement startled Sophia, who stepped backward. Ethan, please calm down. No. He moved closer again. You don't get to ask for calm after everything you've done. She reached toward him. I'll testify. He frowned. I'll admit everything. Now? Yes. What changed? I've lost everyone already. Before Ethan could answer, thunder shook the cabin. The unstable lantern slipped from the edge of the table. Glass shattered across the floor. Darkness swallowed the room except for flashes of lightning through broken windows. Instinctively, both reached for the fallen lantern. They collided. Ethan grabbed Sophia's wrist. She struggled to pull away. Let me go. Not until you answer me. I already have. You haven't answered enough. His grip tightened. Sophia panicked. She shoved him with all the strength fear could produce. Ethan stumbled backward into an old wooden shelf already weakened by years of decay. The shelf collapsed violently. Heavy tools, rusted equipment, and thick timber crashed downward. A metal-headed splitting maul stored across the top fell with tremendous force. The blunt side struck Ethan's head. The impact echoed through the cabin. Everything became still. Sophia froze. Ethan? He did not respond. Blood slowly spread across the worn wooden floor beneath him. She dropped beside him, desperately shaking his shoulders. Ethan. There was no movement. No reply. Only rain and distant thunder filled the silence. Her trembling hands became stained with blood as she desperately searched for signs of life. Outside, Daniel's car turned onto the narrow dirt road leading toward the cabin. He had followed the location signal until it suddenly stopped transmitting. Leaving his vehicle, he ran through the rain toward the broken doorway. Sophia. Receiving no answer, he pushed the door open. The horrifying scene before him stole every remaining breath. Ethan lay motionless beneath shattered wood and scattered debris. Blood surrounded his head. Sophia knelt beside him, her clothes and hands covered in crimson. She slowly looked up at Daniel with eyes filled not with anger, but with complete shock. I didn't. Her voice failed. I didn't mean. Daniel stared between his oldest friend and his devastated wife, unable to understand what had happened. Nothing inside the cabin resembled a simple accident. Nothing resembled a planned murder either. Every scattered object, every broken board, every blood-stained surface suggested a struggle. Yet none explained how the fatal blow had truly occurred. As sirens began echoing faintly through the storm in the distance, Daniel realized that the nightmare consuming all three of their lives was no longer a private tragedy. It had become a homicide investigation, and the truth hidden inside that abandoned cabin would soon belong to Detective Rachel Bennett. The first patrol officers arrived within minutes of Daniel's emergency call, their flashing lights cutting through the darkness surrounding the abandoned lakeside cabin. Rain continued falling steadily, washing thin streams of blood toward the broken porch steps while paramedics hurried inside. Daniel stood frozen beneath the trees, unable to take his eyes off Ethan's motionless body. Nearby, Sophia sat wrapped in a blanket, trembling uncontrollably as officers separated her from the crime scene. Shortly afterward, Detective Rachel Bennett arrived. She stepped from an unmarked vehicle carrying a weatherproof evidence folder beneath one arm. Calm, observant, and methodical, Rachel immediately surveyed the surroundings before speaking to anyone. Experience had taught her that first impressions often disappeared once physical evidence began telling its own story. She walked slowly around the cabin. Broken branches, fresh tire tracks, several distinct footprints disappearing into wet soil. Nothing seemed entirely consistent with the initial statements collected by patrol officers. Inside, forensic technicians carefully photographed every inch of the cabin. The collapsed wooden shelf remained exactly where it had fallen. Scattered medical papers covered the floor. A shattered lantern lay beside overturned furniture. Near Ethan's body rested the heavy splitting maul whose blunt head carried visible blood and fragments of hair. Rachel crouched beside it without touching. Document everything before moving a single object, she instructed. The forensic team nodded. Daniel gave his statement first. He explained discovering the affair, secretly investigating the messages, tracking Sophia's location, and arriving moments after Ethan had apparently died. I never saw the actual fight, he said quietly. You only found them afterward? Yes. Rachel wrote several notes. You and Ethan argued recently? No. You confronted him? I wanted answers first. His voice remained steady, but grief lingered beneath every sentence. Sophia's interview proved far more difficult. Still visibly shaken, she described Ethan's demands, the confrontation, the argument, and the collapsing shelf. I pushed him. Rachel looked up. You intentionally pushed him? I only wanted him to let go of my arm. And then, he fell. The shelf collapsed. The tool struck him. Rachel observed her silently. You expect me to believe that? Sophia lowered her head. It's the truth. By sunrise, investigators transported every significant piece of evidence to the forensic laboratory. Rachel refused to settle on any single theory. Experience warned her that emotionally charged cases often encouraged premature conclusions. Instead, she waited for science. The first laboratory reports complicated everything. Fingerprint analysis revealed prints from Ethan and Sophia throughout the cabin. Exactly as expected. Daniel's fingerprints appeared only on the entrance door, supporting his statement that he arrived afterward. However, another unidentified fingerprint appeared on the broken lantern. The print belonged to none of the three. Rachel frowned. Run it again. The technician repeated the comparison. The unidentified print remained. Next came blood pattern analysis. Contrary to Sophia's account, several impact stains suggested Ethan had still been standing after the shelf initially collapsed. That finding contradicted her description of events. Then another report arrived. The medical examiner concluded that Ethan had suffered a blunt force head injury consistent with the maul, but additional bruising on his shoulder appeared to have occurred several minutes earlier during a separate struggle. Rachel quietly pinned every report onto the investigation board. None fit together cleanly. Meanwhile, digital forensic specialists examined Ethan's electronic devices. Deleted text messages were successfully recovered. Most involved arguments with Sophia. Others referenced financial demands and emotional confrontations. One message sent only hours before the meeting immediately caught Rachel's attention. Someone else knows everything. No recipient. No explanation. Only that single sentence. Another technician recovered audio files from Ethan's smartwatch. The device had accidentally recorded fragments of conversation whenever sudden movement activated its emergency recording function. Most clips contained only muffled voices. One recording captured Ethan shouting, "You lied from the beginning." Another included Sophia crying. Then loud crashing sounds interrupted the recording before it ended abruptly. The audio supported portions of Sophia's statement but failed to explain the unexplained injuries. Security investigators soon uncovered additional surveillance footage from a fuel station several miles away. The cameras showed Ethan purchasing bottled water less than an hour before arriving at the cabin. Minutes later, Sophia's vehicle appeared heading in the same direction. Rachel watched carefully. Then another vehicle entered the frame. An older dark pickup truck. It followed Ethan onto the highway before disappearing from view. Can we identify it? The analyst enlarged the image. Rain obscured most identifying details. Only part of the license plate remained visible. Rachel requested traffic camera footage from surrounding roads. Hours later, another breakthrough arrived. Cell tower analysis revealed 3 separate mobile devices connecting near the abandoned cabin that evening. Daniel's phone, Sophia's phone, Ethan's phone. But there had been a 4th device. A prepaid burner phone. Rachel immediately recognized the significance. It matched the same purchasing pattern from her earlier investigation involving anonymous threats sent through disposable phones. She reopened that forgotten case file. Several tower locations overlapped almost perfectly. Coincidence seemed increasingly unlikely. Detectives searched the cabin grounds again with metal detectors and expanded evidence grids. Nearly 50 yards from the shoreline, an officer discovered a discarded cigarette still protected beneath dense brush. Laboratory testing produced DNA belonging to neither Daniel, Sophia, nor Ethan. Someone else had definitely been there. Rachel stood overlooking the lake as evening approached. Every answer uncovered another mystery. The physical evidence contradicted witness statements. Digital records exposed hidden motives. Forensic science dismantled simple explanations. Now undeniable proof established that another unidentified individual had secretly visited the cabin shortly before Ethan died. The investigation had transformed from a tragic confrontation into something far more complicated. As Rachel stared across the dark water, she realized identifying that unknown visitor would determine whether Ethan's death resulted from a desperate accident, deliberate murder, or a carefully concealed crime involving far more than the 3 lives already shattered by betrayal and silence. Detective Rachel Bennett's investigation continued for several more weeks before prosecutors reached their final conclusion. The unidentified fingerprint recovered from the lantern was eventually matched to a former maintenance worker who admitted entering the abandoned cabin days earlier while searching for salvageable tools. His DNA matched the discarded cigarette found outside, and security records confirmed he had left the area well before Ethan and Sophia arrived. Although his presence initially complicated the investigation, forensic timelines ultimately eliminated him as a suspect. The focus returned to the confrontation inside the cabin. Sophia Harper was formally charged with homicide. News of the case spread rapidly throughout the city. Television crews gathered outside the courthouse each morning, drawn by the shocking combination of betrayal, a secret affair, concealed medical information, blackmail, and a violent death. Public opinion divided sharply. Some viewed Sophia as a calculating woman whose deception had destroyed innocent lives. Others believed fear, shame, and psychological collapse had created a tragedy no one truly intended. Inside the courtroom, every seat filled before proceedings began. Families, reporters, legal observers, and curious members of the public waited silently as the judge entered. Sophia appeared thinner than ever. Months of anxiety had changed her completely. Gone was the confident woman once admired by neighbors. She now sat quietly beside her attorney, avoiding eye contact with nearly everyone. Across the courtroom, Daniel watched without recognizing the person he had married. The prosecution opened by carefully reconstructing the relationship between Sophia and Ethan. Medical records established the timeline of Sophia's diagnosis. Hospital staff testified that physicians had repeatedly emphasized the importance of immediate treatment and notifying anyone potentially affected. Phone records demonstrated that she ignored numerous follow-up calls. Digital forensic experts displayed deleted conversations recovered from both phones. Large courtroom monitors revealed messages documenting the affair, Ethan's growing suspicion, his devastating diagnosis, and eventually his demands for money. Jurors listened attentively while every hidden chapter of the relationship unfolded in painful detail. Detective Rachel Bennett then described the crime scene investigation. Using photographs, diagrams, and forensic reports, she explained how physical evidence initially appeared inconsistent before scientific analysis reconstructed the sequence of events. Blood pattern specialists demonstrated how the collapsing shelf, combined with Ethan's struggle to regain balance, aligned with the fatal impact from the splitting maul. Medical experts confirmed that the blunt force injury caused Ethan's death almost immediately. Cross-examination focused heavily upon Sophia's deception before the confrontation. Prosecutors argued that months of dishonesty, emotional manipulation, and deliberate concealment ultimately created the circumstances leading to Ethan's death. The defense did not dispute her lies. Instead, counsel emphasized fear, denial, untreated psychological distress, and the absence of evidence proving she intended to kill Ethan. Several physicians testified about the overwhelming emotional trauma many patients experience immediately after receiving life-changing diagnoses. Experts carefully explained how shame and fear sometimes caused individuals to withdraw from reality rather than confront devastating truths. The testimony never excused Sophia's choices. It only provided context for understanding them. Daniel's testimony became the emotional center of the trial. Walking toward the witness stand felt heavier than any burden he had ever carried. After taking the oath, he looked briefly toward Sophia before facing the attorneys. "Were you aware of the affair?" "No." "When did you discover it?" "The week before Ethan died." He calmly described finding surveillance footage, hidden messages, and private conversations documenting months of betrayal. His voice remained steady until prosecutors asked one final question. "Did you trust your wife?" Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "Completely." Silence settled across the courtroom. "And Ethan?" "He was my brother in every way except blood." Several jurors lowered their eyes. No dramatic outburst followed. Only quiet heartbreak. When Sophia finally chose to testify, the courtroom became perfectly still. She admitted every painful fact. The affair, the diagnosis, the secrecy, the blackmail, the fear. "I should have told the truth the day I received my diagnosis," she said softly. "I convinced myself that pretending nothing had changed would somehow make everything normal again." Tears rolled down her face. Instead, every lie demanded another. The prosecutor approached slowly. "You knowingly withheld critical information from Ethan?" "Yes." "You continued the relationship despite understanding the possible consequences?" "Yes." "You met him voluntarily on the night he died?" "Yes." "Did you push him?" Sophia lowered her head. "Yes." The courtroom remained silent. "But I never wanted him dead." She described the collapsing shelf, the falling mall, and the terrifying seconds that followed. "I tried to save him." Her voice cracked. "I called his name." She struggled to breathe. "I loved him once." The prosecutor paused. "Then why keep lying?" Sophia answered without hesitation. "Because shame became stronger than courage." Closing arguments presented the jury with painful moral questions rather than simple answers. The prosecution insisted every tragedy began with Sophia's deliberate deception. The defense argued that while her choices were undeniably reckless and morally wrong, the fatal injury resulted from a chaotic struggle instead of intentional murder. Jurors spent 3 days reviewing evidence. Medical records, digital communications, forensic diagrams, audio recordings, witness testimony. Every document reflected human weakness rather than simple villainy. Finally, the courtroom filled once again as the jury returned. The foreperson stood. After finding Sophia criminally responsible for her actions during the confrontation, the jury rejected the allegation that she had intentionally planned Ethan's death, concluding the evidence supported a lesser homicide offense rather than premeditated murder. The verdict brought legal resolution but offered no emotional victory. Daniel quietly left the courtroom without speaking. Sophia lowered her head as tears filled her eyes. Detective Rachel Bennett watched silently from the back row, understanding that justice had answered the law's questions but could never repair the lives already destroyed. As sentencing approached, everyone involved faced one final opportunity to reflect upon the irreversible cost of silence, betrayal, fear, and the painful truth that some consequences continue long after every courtroom has emptied. The courtroom slowly emptied after sentencing, leaving behind rows of vacant seats that only hours earlier had witnessed the final chapter of a tragedy stretching far beyond a single act of violence. Reporters packed away their cameras, attorneys gathered heavy case files, and courthouse staff quietly prepared for another day's proceedings. For everyone else, the case was officially over. For Daniel Harper, Detective Rachel Bennett, and the families forever changed by Ethan's death, the hardest part was only beginning. Sophia stood one final time before being escorted from the courtroom. She briefly turned toward the public gallery. Daniel remained seated near the aisle, his hands folded tightly together. Their eyes met for only a few seconds. No words were exchanged. Nothing remained that either of them could say capable of repairing 15 years of shared memories now buried beneath betrayal, grief, and irreversible consequences. As officers led Sophia away, she quietly whispered, "I'm sorry." Daniel heard the words. He simply closed his eyes. Outside, the afternoon sky had finally cleared after days of rain. Sunlight reflected across courthouse windows with almost painful brightness, creating a striking contrast to the heaviness carried by everyone leaving the building. Weeks passed. Daniel sold the family home. Every room contained reminders too painful to preserve. The kitchen where they had shared ordinary breakfasts. The living room where laughter once echoed during holiday gatherings. The bedroom where trust quietly dissolved beneath hidden phone calls and unanswered questions. Packing those memories proved far more difficult than boxing furniture. He donated many personal belongings to local charities before moving into a modest apartment closer to his architectural office. Work gradually became therapy. Designing schools, community centers, and affordable housing projects allowed him to focus upon creating places built for hope instead of dwelling endlessly upon destruction. Healing arrived slowly. Some mornings still began with overwhelming sadness. Other days brought unexpected moments of peace. He learned that recovery did not erase grief. It simply taught people how to carry it without allowing it to define every remaining chapter of life. Several months after the trial, Daniel accepted an invitation to speak during a public health awareness seminar organized by local physicians and community advocates. Standing behind the podium, he looked across an audience filled with healthcare workers, students, families, and individuals living with HIV. He chose his words carefully. This tragedy was never caused by a medical diagnosis alone. The room remained silent. It was caused by fear, secrecy, denial, and the belief that hiding the truth could somehow protect the people we love. He paused briefly. Modern medicine gives people hope, treatment, and long lives. Shame only steals those opportunities. His speech received quiet applause. Afterward, several attendees privately thanked him for speaking honestly about responsibility, compassion, testing, treatment, and open communication rather than reinforcing fear or prejudice. Daniel continued volunteering with organizations promoting HIV education and encouraging routine medical screening, early treatment, and honest conversations between partners. He often reminded audiences that viruses never chose victims, but human decisions could either reduce harm or deepen suffering. Ethan's parents also attended one awareness event. Though grief remained visible in their faces, they embraced Daniel warmly. No apology could restore their son. Still, choosing understanding over hatred offered each of them a small measure of peace. Meanwhile, Detective Rachel Bennett officially closed the investigation. Before filing the final reports into departmental archives, she quietly reread her original field notes from the night at the lakeside cabin. Every page reminded her that crimes rarely began where investigators first discovered bodies. Most started months or years earlier. A careless lie, a hidden addiction, a secret relationship, an ignored warning, a desperate decision made during fear instead of honesty. Violence merely revealed damage already growing beneath the surface. Rachel often shared that lesson with younger detectives entering homicide investigations. Never assume murder begins with the weapon, she told them. It usually begins with something people were too afraid to say. The sentence stayed with many of them long after training sessions ended. Far away from courtrooms and police stations, the abandoned cabin eventually disappeared beneath demolition crews. Weathered boards were removed. Broken windows vanished. Fresh earth covered the blood-stained floor where 3 lives had changed forever. Nature slowly reclaimed the shoreline as new trees grew where police tape had once fluttered in the wind. Visitors passing the lake months later never imagined the heartbreak that had unfolded there. Time moved forward. Scars remained. Daniel never remarried. Not because love became impossible, but because rebuilding trust required patience he refused to rush. He continued designing buildings intended to shelter families, quietly hoping that somewhere inside those homes people would choose honesty before fear, compassion before silence, and responsibility before regret. Sophia served her sentence carrying the unbearable weight of decisions she could never undo. Every letter she wrote expressed the same painful realization. The truth she feared revealing had ultimately caused far greater suffering than the diagnosis itself ever could. Ethan's memory lived on through scholarship funds established by his parents to support healthcare education for young medical professionals dedicated to infectious disease treatment and patient counseling. Their son's name gradually became associated with learning, awareness, and prevention instead of only tragedy. In the end, the verdict delivered legal accountability, yet justice arrived too late to restore what betrayal had taken away. One hidden truth had destroyed a marriage, ended a lifelong friendship, and claimed a human life before anyone found the courage to confront reality. The quiet lesson left behind remained painfully simple. Fear may silence the truth for a season, but every buried secret continues growing in darkness until its consequences reach everyone standing closest to it. And by then, even justice cannot return what honesty might once have saved.